Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our third TMA virtual legislative briefing of 2023, where we'll be discussing the Senate Republicans' business tax relief proposals and other legislation moving through the Illinois General Assembly this session. My name is Rich Carter. I'm TMA's government affairs consultant, and I'll be the moderator for today's briefing. We're joined by TMA state lobbyist David Curran, as well as a very special guest, Senate Republican leader John Curran of Downers Grove. Good morning, David and Leader Curran.
Good morning.
Good morning, Rich.
Thanks for being here. We're going to spend the next half hour discussing the legislative action in the Illinois Senate as the spring session nears its end later this month and its potential impact on TMA members. At the end of the program, TMA members will have an opportunity to ask written questions of Leader Curran by typing them into the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel. Now, I'll turn it over to TMA state lobbyist David Curran, who will introduce our special guest and get his thoughts on the legislative session to date. Floor is yours, David.
Well, thank you, Rich. And welcome, Leader Curran. Congratulations on your new position as Senate Republican leader. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Give the members a little bit of your background.
Sure. So, Dave, I was first appointed to the Illinois Senate in 2017. Prior to that, grew up in Evergreen Park, went to the University of Illinois, played football there, went to law school at Northern Illinois University, married, father, 4 daughters. And, I worked 19 years in the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, both as a criminal prosecutor and then defending the county in federal litigation, and ultimately developed a specialty in labor and employment, which employment issues are something that would that are very important to your members here. I was elected to my village board in Woodridge. I served on my county board in DuPage for 7 years as vice chairman. And then when my predecessor, Senator Christine Radonio, who was the Republican leader at the time, retired, I was appointed to her seat, which obviously was a huge honor and big shoes to fill. Leader Radonio was a trailblazer. She was the first female leader of any caucus in the state's history. So, and she's a great friend and mentor.
Great. Well, we've got 3 weeks left of session, and so I know you've been through a lot. But what have you learned the most in leading Republicans in the Senate this year?
Well, I've always been a big believer in listening. That's the skill I've learned as a lawyer, really how to listen and how important it is to listen. But I think in this role, I've also learned I really need to over communicate. And that's been something that has been going very well, just keeping everyone in the loop, making sure everyone is, involved in our agenda and, moving the ball forward for the Senate Republicans and really what I view as the state of Illinois. So it's really that approach of over communicating. Something I've learned is incredibly important. And so far, that's been going well.
That's interesting. Well, a few weeks ago, you led Senate Republicans in unveiling these business tax proposals. Can you tell us about the bills and what chances they have of getting in the budget?
Yeah, so maybe I'll take the second question first. So right now we're 3 weeks out with in budget negotiations. There appears to be some interest in discussing a bipartisan budget. We have not participated in the actual budget in quite some time here. We are in the superminority. We're 19 members out of 59 in the Senate. But the reality is we're not here to go along and get along. We need to see real meaningful reforms in the budget. And our focus, our laser focus is small and mid-sized business. And those are those reforms we need to see in order to, I think get us along to come along and participate. So some of those, I am the sponsor of getting rid of the net operating loss cap. So this was a cap on net operating loss deductions. It's a $100,000 cap. This is incredibly harmful to especially like startup businesses or any business, any industry that kind of goes into a slump. This prevents those businesses from really offsetting profits and losses and smoothing out the year over year. We're proposing that we remove that we did not have a cap, and that cap was put in place in 2021 by Governor Pritzker and the Democratic majority, and it's just been bad policy. Senator Andrew Chesney, LLC filing reduction. I think that's something that most of your businesses are some sort of incorporated status. I think that's something that could be helpful. While small, can be very impactful to a lot of small businesses around the state. Senator Jill Tracy has the estate tax, repealing the estate tax in the state of Illinois. This is an onerous tax. People are already dealing with the federal estate tax. Our threshold's $4 million. The federal is 10. We're looking to get rid of it altogether. This is one of this drives people out of Illinois late in career, because it's really that succession planning with our small and mid-sized businesses where we've really become an impediment. We often wonder why we see so many folks leaving. We know it's property taxes, but, we do not tax retirement income, but it's really things like this estate tax, really are impair businesses. Senator Lewis has a legacy business tax credit. Senator DeWitt has an innovation tax credit and also research and development tax credit. So really kind of a package there, and we're looking to push through. We're not looking for one. We're looking for, to get a bunch of these proposals put into the budget.
That's good. And what types of legislation do you expect to be adopted in the General Assembly this session that would directly affect small and mid-sized manufacturers?
Well, I think your members, if they've been following, they've been seeing all sorts of leaves, paid leave, various topics, various issues. Some of your members may already be offering these leaves voluntarily as they manage their business and manage their workforce. Really, the state, interfering in that relationship is harmful to small business. And while any one particular leave may sound like a good idea in an isolated instance, the reality is mandating this on businesses around the state, not taking the time to understand each business's individual circumstances and challenges to growth and success is a problem. So we've been, we've just, in being an employment lawyer, I understand this greatly. So we've been really pushing back on the mandatory leaves. At the same, and there's also really we're seeing a lot of legislation trying to expand this reach and the scope of the Illinois Human Rights Act, putting in more really traps for business in managing their workforce. And of course that leads to litigation and, attorney's fees, and can be very expensive for small and mid-sized businesses. So, unfortunately, I think those are kind of two themes that we see regularly from the Democratic majority.
Okay. And obviously, any approach has to be we want to be bipartisan. We don't have a choice. But how can we have a more bipartisan approach on these issues to benefit manufacturing in Illinois?
So it's really getting our voice into the mix. I take the approach that we moderate the policy product of the state. If we're not participating, we know that policy products at the end of the day is going to be far off to the left. So it's really not only we have our proposals that we push and we have successes and get matters enacted, but a lot of the work is on these proposals coming from the majority party, digging in, working with interest groups such as yourself, but really highlighting the deficits in them and trying to get them either set off to the side and defeated or narrowed. In scope and narrowed in effect. It's really our participation in the process, superminority, brings balance to Illinois. I'm at 19, Dave. I hope we need to grow that. We're way out of balance, and the more we grow, the more balance that is going to bring to this state.
Well, I know TMA members have been pretty excited about putting in witness slips online against or for bills that would affect them. And but how would you suggest TMA members assist in promoting the causes that and positions in the State House that are in their interests?
And if I could just pause on that for a second, Dave, I want to tell your members, thank you. And it's incredibly important that you do engage in those, those witness slips tip our staff off that do our analysis. Those witness slips tip off the Senate. That is read at when a bill is called in committee, as you know, Dave, you're a regular down here, and hearing that opposition read off, really signals to the senators on the committee and the minority party to, there are significant problems with this bill. We know that going in, but when we get that from staff, so going in as we prep for committee, but it really sets the tone of the bill presentation at that point. So I thank your members for taking the time to do that. If any of them are wondering, does it matter? Yes, it does matter. I apologize. You had a little bit more of a question there, Dave, so you may have to repeat that.
I appreciate that. What would you like our members to be aware of as the spring session comes to a close here? It's going to be, quite a nail biter as we come into the last 3 weeks. So what would you like our members to know?
Look, we're going to have, I think we've been pushing the theme. My discussions with the governor, with the Senate president, through the pandemic, there has been a lot of assistance for homeowners, renters, employees. We have not provided assistance to business, to small, to the, which is the backbone of our economy. And, when the governor talks about, Illinois this year, we're projecting next year, 2024, record revenue for the state of Illinois for this budget coming up. Never had more revenue. If not now, when? This is the time to strengthen, empower our state economy, local economies, and business community. So, and it is through that budget process. You're not going to see standalone bills that I talked about. None of them are going to be a standalone bill passed. They're going to be wrapped. Any successes we have are going to be wrapped into that budget. So as we work towards the May 19th adjournment, I think that's the biggest thing to keep our eye on is, and I think you're going to want to know that there was some Republican support there. That should tell you that we have gotten some successes. And if they're not there, if there is not Republican support there, I think that's going to tell you that the majority party decided to go it alone and was not interested in helping small and mid-sized businesses throughout the state.
Okay, interesting. Well, we could just take one step back a little bit and talk about your district and the TMA members in your district, small and mid-sized manufacturers in your district. I know we have members. Have you gotten to meet anybody yet? And
sure. I have, and I apologize, the names don't come, but I have a good manufacturing corridor in Downers Grove along the Belmont train station. I have we have some manufacturing up towards Butterfield and Downers Grove, and then I am along the 55 corridor as well, which I know is a lot of warehousing, but you also got manufacturing there as well. And so I've gotten and met some, but I really look forward to, maybe partnering with you and Rich on, getting to know some more of your members in my district.
Great. Well, Rich, do we have any questions from the members for the leader? I know I could go on for a couple more, but go ahead.
Great. Thanks, David. Yes, now it is time for questions and answers with TMA members. So for those of you on your computers, or if you're using the mobile app, you can type your question and submit it through the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel. I'll read the questions and ask Leader Curran to answer them. In the meantime, I will ask Leader Curran the first question that was pre-submitted by a TMA member. The question is, for Leader Curran, the governor's first 4 years gave us a massive minimum wage hike, huge tax increases on businesses, and a costly clean energy bill that's already starting to limit energy supply in our state. What should TMA members be concerned about most from the governor and the legislators the next 4 years? Leader Curran?
Rich, I think that energy space is a space that, really merits a lot of concern going forward. And, some of what was done, bringing any sort of instability to our energy prices. I think Illinois has a lot of natural advantages. And one of them used to be cheap, reliable energy. We still have a reliable grid, but, that's being tinkered with. And my fear is that reliability is going to be lessened. And so I think that is something that really merits watching over the next 4 years.
Great, thank you. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, please type it into the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel. All right, we do have another question from a TMA member. The question is, as a new leader in the super minority party, how can you get anything done legislatively for the people and businesses you represent when the majority party doesn't need your votes? Leader Curran?
Well, the majority party, it takes the majority party wanting a bipartisan product. I think that is the leverage that we have, because that essentially tells the citizens of Illinois that this was something that was collaborative, and all concerns around the state were taken into it. We represent the vast geography of the state of Illinois, and really cutting those people out that live in those areas because they happen to elect a member of the minority party is not good governance, and it does not lead to good policy. So I do think that there's some appetite for chasing that. I wish it was more robust, I'll be honest with you, but we're always going to, on our end, we're always going to do our job. We're always going to be prepared, work it up, just like I would in private practice, work up any case and be ready to seize in those opportunities when there is a path to significant Republican input and ultimately a bipartisan policy product.
Thank you, Leader. All right, we do have another question from a TMA member. The question is, as an employee law attorney, how does Illinois rate compared to other states on issues directly concerning employees? Is this a good place or not so good? Leader?
I wish I could say good, but I can't. This is an extremely challenging state to operate a business and to employ people. Illinois, New York, California, these are incredibly complex states because the myriad of state statutes layered on top of and within the federal statutes that you already have to comply with, and oftentimes taking what you have to comply with federally and extending that out even further, which makes compliance more difficult. And you really have to be up on, new laws with this state, tweaks, and the effects that they can cause. So unfortunately, when we look to our neighbors, we look to an Indiana, they do not set up all these hoops for employers that we have here in Illinois, and that's an approach we're really trying to turn around, which kind of leads me back to when we talked about mandates, these paid leaves. This is an area that the state really needs to get out of and, let employers run their business.
Thanks, Leader. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, please type your question on the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel. We do have another question from a TMA member. The question is, Leader Curran, earlier in the session, you mentioned that you were pushing back on the unpaid leave bills. But what are the chances of something getting passed by the end of the session?
We've had bills pass out of the Senate. They're in the House. I don't think we've continued to track. I think it's likely that you're going to see continued, unpaid leave. We have one regarding victims of crime. We have one regarding, we've had ones around funeral. So these are, I think it's likely, quite frankly.
Thanks, Leader. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, please type it on your question on the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel. We do have another question from a TMA member. The question is, do you think Governor Pritzker and the Democrats will attempt to tie the progressive tax legislation to a constitutional amendment or to a potentially popular bill on school funding, childcare, or an abortion rights bill? Can tax legislation be attached to non-tax legislation to increase the odds of its passage? Leader?
Well, your last question first. We have in our Illinois Constitution single subject rule with regards to legislation. We do note that the Illinois Supreme Court has weighed in on that very liberally and expansively, but there is still a single subject rule, and as expansive as they are, to tie a tax bill and a non-tax bill together would not pass constitutional review, in my opinion. The progressive income tax was something that the governor pursued. Recently, we have heard from a few Democrats that are keeping that issue alive, but the governor has said it's set aside. I think we've seen Speaker Welch recently say that that's been set aside and that is not a focus anymore. It can come back at any time, but through the incredible work of citizens around the state, like your members, we were able to beat that back. So but that would have to be a standalone, and that's a constitutional amendment that would have to go again before the voters. Thankfully, one of the things we got right in this state when our most recent constitution was put together was they put a flat tax in.
Thanks, Leader. All right, we do have another question from a TMA member. The question is, TMA members would like our lawmakers to understand that each of their tweaks that affect our businesses cause us to have to charge more and then often cause us to lose competitive bids. How can we get that point across to them? Leader?
Working through your association, continuing the message down here in Springfield, that point, you win people over little by little, but it is really that incremental progress on messaging that is so important. So it's just being consistent and continuing, to put faces and business names to this, that you're really impairing and driving business out of this state, making it very difficult to operate business with these continued tweaks. And it is at this point in time, I'm sad to say, continual tweaks that are coming. Every sponsor and majority party that poses one of these thinks it's just some small little shouldn't cause a problem, and that's not true. And we continue to message that point.
Thank you, Leader. All right, I think we have time for one more question that was submitted. The question is, the legislators who represent me are Democrats, and I'm sure they take their orders from the top. What can I do as one business owner to convince them to stop taking actions that hurt business growth and job creation? Leader?
You have to get to know them. You have to communicate. There's not as much messaging. There's orders from the top. That's a little more of a myth. It is really messaging from the bottom in these caucuses up. And really, the Senate president, the Speaker of the House, they're constantly taking the temperature of their caucus, making sure that they're aligned with their members' needs, views, interests. And so it can be incredibly impactful. If you're a business and you have a Democrat, I would actually get to know any legislator that represents you, Republican or Democrat, but especially if you have a Democratic legislator that represents you, get to know them, get them out to your business, show them how tight your operation is, your margins are, and really emphasize with them that these tweaks are incredibly disruptive. That would be a tremendous service to the business community if more businesses were pulling in their Democratic members and really getting them to understand how difficult it is to operate their small business and the value you bring, the employees you employ, the fact that you're like pillars in our community. And so that would be incredibly helpful. That's a great question.
Thanks, Leader. All right, we have one more question quickly. We're going to squeeze it in before we leave. But the question is, can the Leader comment quickly on the status of the BIPA case involving White Castle and the $17 billion settlement.
So this is a killer to business completely. We have the most onerous BIPA statute. It was reckless in what was put in place. We have the most onerous BIPA statute throughout the entire country. We see the effect with the White Castle case. No business can survive. I mean, that's a death sentence for a business. We are pushing, and there are bipartisan discussions on actual BIPA reform to rein that in. Of course, we seize and think this is the opportunity to rein it in significantly. And so I think a lot of those discussions there's a little hesitancy to go as far as we want to go, but those discussions are ongoing, and that is a big target in these final 3 weeks to reform that BIPA statute.
Great, thanks, Leader. All right, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but Leader Curran, do you have any closing thoughts for TMA members?
I would just ask you to please stay engaged. If you're on this, if you're watching this, clearly you are engaged, you care about the policies that the state puts forward. Please, continue to work through your association, work through Rich and David. It's incredibly important to have that presence down here in Springfield day in and day out as we really work in collaboration and partnership on these issues that affect small and mid-sized business. So thank you both for having me on this morning, giving me this opportunity to talk to your members. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Leader. Well, that'll do it for today's virtual briefing discussing legislation that will impact TMA members in the spring session of the Illinois General Assembly. I want to thank Senate Republican Leader John Curran of Downers Grove for joining us today, along with TMA state lobbyist David Curran. And of course, we want to thank all of our TMA members who took time out of their day to join us today. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Goodbye.